Ladies and gentlemen, here we are. We're here, baby. We're here. May Madness is finally here, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my God. The drama of the final week of the season in college lacrosse centered around a couple of teams: the Army Black Knights, the Harvard Crimson, the Syracuse Orange, a couple teams like that. So let's talk about the team that, is out. Let's just talk about them first. The Army Black Knights. First things first. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, we need the tournament expanded. And, well, there's a bit of a problem with that. You can't expand the tournament without having more teams in. You can't expand the tournament without having more AQs. Hint, hint, the ACC should have an AQ at this point. Somebody tell Boston College, add back lacrosse. Somebody tell Michigan State, add back lacrosse so, Johns Hopkins can go to the ACC, because that's what I really want. I really want something like that. But that's not going to happen, is it? That's not going to happen. So Army's big issue was RPI, SOS, and the fact that they lost to Colgate in the Patriot League semifinals. And Colgate won the Patriot League. So, yeah. Colgate gets the automatic bid for the Patriot League. Again, there are not too many, there are not too many teams, from, one bid conferences that could get two teams in. Army, unfortunately, again, was the only victim this year. The bubble was really, really small. I said a couple weeks ago that the bubble was pretty non-existent. Army had a shoe-in to win. Another team that was also, pretty much on the bubble was Richmond. But Richmond took care of business and won the A-10. Army could not take care of business, and thus they could not win. And the field was basically set. Had Army won, they would have pushed, Harvard out. They probably would have pushed Harvard out. Well, actually, no, Harvard would still be in. We would have had no bubble at all if Army won the Patriot League. There would have been no bubble. So the only team that was on the bubble was the team that could not get it done at the end. It is rather unfortunate that Army couldn't get it done, but we have our bracket. We have our 18 teams, and we'll talk about the women's side a little bit too for a second, So the number one team is the Cornell Big Red. CJ Kirst, likely winning the Tewaaraton, leads the country in points and whatnot. Just he's doing all they can be. And Albany and Siena back in the tournament for the first time in 10 years or so. Crazy. Richmond gets North Carolina. Pretty interesting North Carolina team. They are the 8th seed. Notre Dame unseeded. They'll take on the team with the most victories in the nation, the Big Ten champions, the Ohio State Buckeyes, with Caleb Byock in the cage. Colgate, winners of the Patriot, takes on Penn State. Bobby Moe and Air Force, the winners of the NEC and the A-Sun, respectively. One of those teams will get Maryland. Georgetown. They are going to be an interesting bunch. I tell you what, an interesting bunch that will get. They'll get something interesting. They'll get something interesting. They'll get those Duke Blue Devils. I don't think Duke is a fraud team, but they're a 7th seed. Duke is frauds. Could not win the ACC. Syracuse won the ACC. Thus, Syracuse gets Harvard. And Harvard already played Syracuse at this point in the season. Anyway, Princeton, they lost the Ivy League championship game to Cornell. So they get the 3 seed, and they'll take on the team that's won 10 straight games in the Towson Tigers, the CAA champs. So, yeah, 3 bids from the Ivy, 3 from the Big Ten, 4 from the ACC, and everybody else is 1 bid league. Georgetown getting Duke. Georgetown won the Big East. Georgetown was able to take down Villanova to get here. On the women's side, If you're not getting one of those, top 8 seeds, North Carolina, Boston College, and Northwestern, top 3 Big 12 champion, the first ever Big 12 champion in Florida, gets the 4 seed. Virginia, Maryland, Yale, and Johns Hopkins round out the top 8. If we're not getting a final that consists of North Carolina, Boston College, or Northwestern, something's wrong here. North Carolina, Boston College faced off, earlier this season, and it was a good time. It was a good time, I believe. So the women's tournament, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting, I think, to see where we kind of, stand. Again, 29 teams in the women's tournament, way more than the men's by far, because there are way more women's teams, guys. There are way more women's teams. North Carolina is number 1 for a reason. They are undefeated. They've beaten some of the top teams. They've beaten Florida. They've beaten Virginia, who's seeded. They've beaten Northwestern. They've beaten Boston College. They've beaten everybody. So it is North Carolina's to lose. They won the ACC pretty easily. They were able to take care of business and get the top seed. Again, it's not North Carolina, Boston College round 3, or North Carolina somebody. There's got to be somebody for round 3. Yeah, it's got to be something. We're getting something in the women's championship, I think. As far as the NLL goes, the semifinals are in full swing. Matt Vink last night was just on a tear. Last night. He did it all. Buffalo beat Vancouver in the first game last night. The semifinals are going to continue next weekend because Saskatchewan and Halifax decided to have a little oopsie. It's okay. It is currently 5-4 in the second game in Vancouver right now. It is at halftime, I believe, in that game. And then if Buffalo can take care of business tonight, we'll have a second round, sweep. And then there won't be a game in Buffalo next weekend. They didn't even sell out the game on Friday night, which is crazy. Saskatchewan leads Halifax 1-0. And again, Saskatchewan and Halifax will have, a game, 2 games next weekend. If we get to 2 games next weekend, we may only get 1, next weekend. It kind of depends on if Saskatchewan can pull it out next Saturday in the Saskatchewan Center. I can't speak. Gosh. If Saskatchewan can pull it out next weekend, we will have an NLL finals that starts maybe the 3rd Saturday in May. It's dead. So we'll see how everything goes. Again, Buffalo, Saskatchewan each lead 1-0. Again, we are in progress of the second game of the Buffalo-Vancouver series. Again, the Saskatchewan-Halifax series will continue next Saturday. So again, the semifinal schedule was a little weird. It shouldn't have been weird in the first place. In fact, there was an ESPN, U game scheduled for this past weekend, but that just did not happen because of the way the playoffs are scheduled and the way the arena availability is. Y'all know how, stuff is. So, yeah. Who do y'all got for the college championships for the men and the women? I have North Carolina women and women's, and then it is a big toss-up for me. Maryland with all the roster, the talent that they've been able to produce, they could not win the Big Ten though. They lost to Ohio State, but Maryland, because their metrics was so good, number 1 SOS, number 1 RPI, that's why they're still a 2 seed. And Cornell, big favorites. Have a lot of talent. It's not It's not just C.J. Kurtz. There's a plenty of guys on that offense. I think Cornell could do a lot of damage. I don't think Notre Dame is getting back to the title game. I just don't see it. Ohio State, not that great. North Carolina, not that great either. Syracuse is okay. They were able to beat Notre Dame, which is cool. But again, I just don't see it. I did think so early in the season, but now I'm starting to see where my eyes really are, because I think Cornell Big Red are pretty much unstoppable. I think it will be a Cornell Maryland title game, in my personal opinion. I think there are other teams like Penn State, Georgetown, and Duke that are just It's going to be Cornell Penn. It's going to be Cornell Maryland, and Cornell will come out with the title. So it'll be Cornell on the men's side, North Carolina on the women's side. I know that's very basic, but that's what I got. What do you got for the championships of both men's and women's college lacrosse? Shout it out in the comment section and stuff like that below. And I'll see you, later, more indoor and arena football later this week. Yeah.